Hello, my name is Mildred. I'm the host and life coach of Let's Be Real About It. It's a talk show, and this show is where we can be true and we can be real about life issues. We can speak about the traumatic and devastating things that have occurred in our lives or that may be occurring right now at this present time. We will talk with people from all races, all cultures, all religions, all nationalities, because hurt, pain, devastation, and traumatic experience has the ability to affect us all. It doesn't care. It crosses boundaries. It has no respect to person. So nobody is exempt from it. So it's time that we face the truth. It's time that we be real about the truth. It's time that we face life and stop passing the buck, as it say, or the buck, as it say. It's time to stop pointing the finger. It's time to be real. It's time to be real about what's happening in your life. It's time to be real about the issues in your life, because I know you, like me, want to be delivered and want to be set free and healed. And this is your opportunity. So let's be real about life. Let's be real about what's happening in your life. Let's be real about the life situations. God bless. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Be Real About It, where we are real about real life issues. I am your host, Mildred Towns, and I have to give this disclaimer that this is a no-holds-barred zone. Therefore, some of the contents of the show may be offensive to some, but that is not the intent of the show. But before I introduce my guest tonight, I want to introduce my book, Truth, My Closet Secrets Revealed. It's a book about my real life issues. And I want you to order this book and read it, because I don't want you to go through the things that I have gone through. You know, if it can spare you hurt and pain, please order the book and read it. I also want to introduce you to Hear Me a Cry from the Wound. And for any woman, a young girl of childbearing age, please get this book and hear from a mother's wound in the spirit realm what this baby is saying from his mother's womb. So please order the book. You can send me an email to iheartministries@gmail.com, and I will send you the information on how to order the book. And I just want to send out a special thank you to my sponsors, J&K Style Grill, right here in Virginia Beach, Zion City of Deliverance, and an anonymous sponsor that helps support the show. So I have to say thank you to all of you for what you give and how you support. Let's Be Real About It. Well, I'm excited about my guest tonight. I am so excited about my guest. My special guest today is Juanita Lightfoot. She's an evangelist, and I just want to welcome her to Let's Be Real About It. Evangelist, welcome to the show, to Let's Be Real About It. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. I'm excited about the show. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and be a part. I titled this tonight, I was lost, but now I'm found. Because, you know, when you tell your story, you go through the dark phases of your story, and then you come into the part where you make that rededication to Christ. So I was lost, but now I'm found. Because right now, girl, you're living in your now. So now you're found. So I want you to go ahead, and I want you to introduce yourself.
So before I even go further, it's weird that's what you named it, because anytime before I minister in any way, I always really meditate on it the night before. And so when I was meditating on this, that's what God said to me. He said, you were lost, but now you're found. So for you to, that's what I'm looking like. God, that's nothing but God. So I know that God is in this right here. So that alone is just a blessing. But yeah, so I'm Juanita Lightfoot, and been on this earth for 34 years, born and raised in the Church of God in Christ. Unfortunately, within these 34 years, my whole life, I did not spend in the church. At the age of 18, I decided to try life on my own because from birth to 18, I was a really sheltered child. I was sheltered from a lot of things of the world, just always, all I knew was church, church at least 4 or 5 times a week. And so when I turned 18, it was a decision based off of a man I had in my life, to where my life kind of just centered around him. I went to work, I went to school, but outside of that, my life was him. He was my life. And so within me giving him that much power of my life, in a sense, he became my God, unfortunately. And so me closing the door on the actual God, and I just slowly but surely just become falling into sin, into so much sin, the sin of, we having unmarital sex. We were indulging into drinking, into smoking, and all these things I never was opened up to before this time. But now, because I'm so far away from God, I'm just falling deeper and deeper into sin. And so within that relationship, after a year of us being together, at this time I was now 18, we started actually dating when I was like 16, 17. So a year into our relationship, there was signs here and there of aggressive behavior, but it wasn't until I was in college that he started showing that abusive side. Whereas before I knew like I said, he was aggressive. So he was always getting into these fights, like fights on the street, fights in the club, just fights with people for no reason. And so now this 6'3", 180 pounds man is now turning his aggression to me, and it got to a point in our relationship, like I said, we were doing what people that were shacking up were doing. I found myself pregnant. And so within even being pregnant, that didn't stop the hits, that didn't stop the verbal abuse, that didn't stop the mental abuse, that didn't stop the physical abuse. So it actually made things worse, carrying his child. And so then it comes to a point to where I actually lost our child. I was in a really bad car accident that should have took my own life. But within me being 6 months pregnant, while I was in the hospital, my baby stopped breathing. And so when I finally got out of the hospital, it was something about getting out of the hospital to where I didn't care anymore. And he always told me that if I ever left him, he would kill me. If I ever went to the police, he would kill me. If I told anybody, he would kill me. So I felt to where it was like being with him, I was in hell. So I'm like, if my options are to stay here and be in hell or leave him and die, I'm gonna just try my chance and see what happens if I leave him. If he kills me, he kills me. But I'm like, me losing my daughter was such a blow to me that I didn't even feel like living after that, if that even makes sense. So I finally left him and I decided to go back to my parents' house. And I know I'm kind of jumping ahead, but so long story short, within being in that relationship with him, I got put out of my parents' house. So that's how we ended up living together. And so within me losing my daughter, I tried my hardest to get back into my parents' house, and they actually accepted me back in. And so that allowed me to get away from that relationship. And he actually didn't never come after me or try to kill me or anything like that. It was just all talk. And so the abuse with him.
Let me ask you something. Um, why was it that you kept it a secret that, from your parents, that he was being abusive to you?
So being that young, like I said, the abuse started with him when I was 18, and it carried until I was almost 19 when I finally got away from him. So within that year, I didn't know how to tell them, because things like that, I never knew of anybody to have dealt with that. He's isolated me from my family. Like I have two older sisters. He's isolated me from them, so I couldn't tell them. He isolated me away from any friends, so I didn't have any friends to talk to. And then I didn't think my parents would understand. And so it was just like I didn't have anyone to go to. So it was, I didn't tell anybody at my job. I didn't tell anybody at school. You know, it was just a point to where all I needed to do was to hide it. And me not even knowing anything about makeup, that's when I first learned how to wear makeup, was because I had to always go to Rite Aid and try to find some concealer or some foundation to cover up my black eye. And it was just like, I didn't know who to turn to. You know, my dad asked about it a couple times when he saw me, because he was like, come, like, what's going on with your face? And I'm like, oh, I ran into the wall. Or, oh, you know, I would make an excuse for it. But I didn't know how to tell anybody. And so it was just like, I was ashamed, like I did something wrong, instead of me being able to really just open up. And then still it was that fear, because he told me if I told anybody, he would kill me. So it was fear mixed within just not thinking that nobody understood. Because I never, within my circle, I never had anybody ever come to me about any kind of domestic violence. My mom, as far as I know, never dealt with that. Either my sisters never dealt with that. You know, nobody that was closely attached to me has ever dealt with domestic violence. So I'm like, I honestly didn't know who to talk to, who to run to.
So let me ask you this too. When uh when your parents put you out of let me ask this. When you lost your baby, you went to your parents and you were seeking help, and your parents said to you, get over it. So you felt as though you was abandoned by the church. You felt as though you was abandoned. And abandoned may not be the correct word, but you felt as though you had nobody to turn to, and you left the church. You know, your parents had already put you out, so you left the church. You left your parents, and you stayed with this young man. Correct?
Yeah. So it kind of, I guess I didn't tell it in order. So within us living together. And so within me becoming pregnant, and then me moving back to my parents' house right after I lost my daughter, I moved back in with them. So within me living at my parents' house, you know, I still wasn't back into the church because I already had left the church a year prior. And so within me now coming back to my parents' house, and you know, I'm having these nightmares about my daughter, you know, and so I went to my parents about these nightmares that I was having. And so I was told within that, you know, to just get over it. And so I don't, at that, I see it now on a different side of it. I see it now on the side. So to defend my parents in a sense, I don't think they said it in trying to be insensitive, but as me being an 18-year-old child that just experienced something so traumatic, I don't think that would have been the words for my daughter if my daughter came to me in that situation. And so as me being an 18-year-old child that just went through this very traumatic experience, I was looking for help, but I don't think my parents realized I was really trying to cry out. I was crying out for help. And so I feel like they didn't know that because I didn't tell them the whole story. I didn't tell them the pain behind it. I didn't tell them the hurt behind it. I didn't tell them the domestic violence behind it. So they didn't understand that. But in my 18-year-old mind, I took my anger, my frustration out, not on my parents. I took it out on God. And I took it out on God because of what I was always brought up in as this being a Church of God in Christ home. And we love God and God is for everything. And I'm thinking, well, God took my daughter. And I'm like, I don't have anybody to talk to about this situation. And so I was angry at God. And so this was a point to where the devil was using me in every way he could use me, because that made me pull me more and more into sin. That's where the drinking started. And not even just a few drinks here or there. It was heavily drinking. It was, I didn't want to be sober at all. I didn't want to think about my problems at all. I didn't want to have to focus on having these nightmares at all. So I would drink myself into a slumber. I would find myself on different people's couches passed out. I would smoke until I couldn't feel my lungs no more. Mind you, within this car accident that I was in, one of my lungs collapsed. And so working on one lung, this is how destructive behavior I was kind of spiral I was going down, that I didn't care about life because I felt like nobody cared about me. So I didn't care about my own life. And I just cared about having a good time for the sense, just so I don't have to think about my problems. And it was like this toxic behavior kept leading to all of these relationships that was not any good for me. And so then that's where it led. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask, just backing up just a little bit.
Okay.
How important from your own experience, in your own point of view, how important is it after a traumatic experience of the loss of a loved one? How important is it to seek counseling or have somebody that you can go to and that you can talk it out with? How important is that?
I feel like it's very important because there's always triggers. And that's one thing people have to realize. When you lose someone, there's always something that's going to trigger you to think about that person again. And so you have to come to a point of real healing. And it's not something that's going to go away overnight. It's not something that's going to just, you could just put a Band-Aid over it. It needs real healing. And a lot of times that healing can just come from venting, being able to speak it out, being able to actually talk about the hurt. If you compress that hurt, you're basically just shaking up a bottle. When you compress it and you just keep compressing it, you're shaking up a bottle until eventually it's going to explode. So you have to seek some kind of positive outlet. That's where you have so many domino effect of negative behavior when a lot of people don't seek out the root problem of where this hurt is coming from. And in my situation, it was from the loss of my daughter. Me losing this, and then not even just losing her, it was what happened within that losing her. Me going into this false labor, it's being a stillbirth. So having a false labor, me pushing out this dead baby, pushing out a baby that's not even fully developed. And then the doctor's putting her in my face saying, here's your baby.
Wow.
And me being 18. So that's how I'm like, if people really understand, I was only 18.
And you was a baby yourself.
I'm a baby myself. And these doctors trying to put a dead baby in my hand for me to hold. Her skin wasn't all the way developed. Her eyes open, looking at me. And I saw that in my head for 3 years. Until I was 21, I saw that vision every day. Like I was literally going crazy in my mind because I'm like, I couldn't read out of it. I'm like, I don't want to see that. And so it was something that I had to eventually get to a point to seek, which it took until me being, 31 to actually seek real help. So I suggest anyone to try to seek help quicker than that. But it's a point to where that's the only way your healing is going to come. You have to, one, know that there is an issue, there is a root cause, that there's something behind it, but then try to find somebody you can confide in. If it's not a friend or a mother, seek out a spiritual leader, go to counseling. But I would say even within counseling, seek out someone that has a little bit more expertise other than book smart. A lot of times that book smart is not what you need. You need somebody that has some real life experience or even hearing from God, that they can speak something into your life that can get you to a breakthrough. So it has to come through full healing.
Yeah, so you got involved in the second relationship. You got married. You had 2 children, 2 beautiful daughters. Beautiful daughters. Beautiful daughters. And you talked about a demonic attraction. You talked about the toxic relationship. And you talked about, well, this is in the third relationship. So talk about what this demonic attraction was in the second relationship.
So within my second relationship, we were very much attracted to uh, not being sober. That's the best way I can put it. I mean, like, honestly, it was like the party started at 10 a.m. and we were both okay with that. And it was just to a point to where you could only be at that so-called high for so long until those demons really just start clashing with one another. And so that's what it was. It was like we were just attracted to the point that we both like to do the same things, but it wasn't nothing really beyond that, you know. So then bringing two children into the situation, it just wasn't the best home for children, two little girls. Let me say that, for two little girls to be brought up in. It wasn't the best situation. So it was like, for me, even though and this is where I went wrong as a person, even though was born and raised in the church, you know, so God was in me somewhere deep, deep, deep within all of this mess I was doing. So I was at a point where my oldest was like 2 or 3 and my youngest was like 1. I was at a point where I was trying to get my life back with Christ, you know, trying to pull some things and just say, you know what, maybe I need to stop all of this. I'm a mother now. You know, I need to show my kids something different. I was trying to pull myself into God more, but it was just like that life was pulling me back. So I eventually decided, you know, that me and his relationship wasn't working. You know, it wasn't even on a domestic level in that sense, but it was mentally, we weren't for each other. It was emotionally, we weren't for each other. It was just so many bad things in this relationship because it was built on not being sober. That's what it was built on. It wasn't built on love. It wasn't built on a family or a foundation of that sort. It was built on all of these things of what, like I said, it stemmed to at the beginning of me just going down this toxic downward spiral. And so he just happened to be somebody I pulled along within this downward spiral I was going on. And so that's where it was just like I said, I never was healing in any of this. In none of this was I ever healing. I just was pulling more people along for the ride.
Mm-hmm. And then you got into a third relationship, but he felt the need to be physical. And this is something I really want you to talk about, because not only for the young girls, but for us older women too, to recognize the red flags when you're in a relationship. Don't
Yeah.
just ignore them, because you said you ignore them. And I know I have ignored red
Yeah.
flags, you know, when I saw them. So talk about that, how important it is to recognize the red flags and then act upon them. Just don't recognize them and then ignore them, you know, but act upon them.
So I have to compare the first relationship with the third relationship in a lot of ways because they were very similar. The only difference is the first relationship, I was a little girl. This third relationship, I was a grown woman. And the red flags were exactly the same, to where the temper was there. He had a really bad temper. And even outside of the temper, I remember within the times me visiting his home, it was so many holes in the walls. And so it's like, you see that and you're like, wow, he's punching holes in walls. Like, you don't care about property. You know what I'm saying? So you're seeing these things. You're seeing that short temper. And then you're also seeing how he treats women in his life. He had a daughter that he did not treat the best. His mom was no longer living, but he had a grandmother he didn't treat the best. He had sisters he didn't treat the best. So one thing I could tell any woman right now, the way you know if a man is going to be for you or not is how he treats the women in his life. If he doesn't treat his mom with respect, his daughter with respect, his sisters, his grandma, if he don't treat none of these women in respect, baby girl, he going to do the same. He going to do the same thing to you. Ain't nothing going to change, because that is a womanizer. That is a person that does not care about the female race, the gender. And so those womanizers, they exist. And so it's like, I didn't understand what a womanizer was until recently. But it's like they walk around and they're like a narcissist. They're a person that always think they're right, and they have these temper tantrums. And so that's what it was with him. He always had to have his way. And if he didn't have his way, he took it out on something. He would break doors off the hinges. He would damage his property. He would tear things up. He likes to break things. He's like, it has to be something big and extravagant, some kind of big explosion for these temper tantrums. And so it was like, within so long of this relationship, he was doing it on all these other things. That was the biggest red flag of it all, is that eventually he's going to turn that back onto me. Like, you're doing this you're damaging your property. You're punching holes through walls. You're damaging your car. You're personally damaging things of value that's supposed to be looked at as something that's valued. So it's like, if he's not going to value these things we look at as value, why would he value my life?
Why would he value your life?
So that's where it's like, as anybody being with someone. Yeah. So it's like, I say, me personally, I didn't understand. What were you saying?
Let me say this.
Hello?
We're going to come back on that in part 2. We're going to start back with these red flags, and right where you left off, right there in part 2. So I just want everybody, I want to thank you for coming tonight and being a guest here on the show, and tell everybody how they can get in contact with you.
You can reach me on Facebook at Juanita Lightfoot. Message me or you can just find my page. But yeah, just Juanita Lightfoot on Facebook.
Okay. And I just want everybody to please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I Heard Ministry, Saturday, 4.22 guest towns. And special thanks I want to give to all of those who watch the show nationally and internationally. I just want to thank you for being a part of the show. And I want everybody to tune in next week for part 2 to hear the rest of her story, because this part was dynamic, because you got to watch for these red flags. You have to watch for the red flags. But I want to hear from you. So please email me at iheardministries@gmail.com to let me know if the show has been a blessing to you. And until next week, let the peace of God reign, rule, and abide in your hearts. Thank you for watching. I'm Mildred Towns. Thank you.